Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph podcast. I am your host, Jackson Rudolph, and this is episode 84. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a legend on the show today. I am talking about the inaugural winner of the Warrior Cup, of the Diamond Nationals, two of the most prestigious sport karate tournaments in the world. Keith Vitali was the first overall grand champion for point fighting at both of those events. And there's many more accomplishments that we'll get into as the show goes on. So Mr. Vitali, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today. Again, you're an absolute legend of the sport, but I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to our audience.
Well, no, thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored. I think Black Belt Magazine's always been the Bible of all the martial arts magazines. And even back when I was competing, we had Karate Illustrated and Official Karate. There was Inside Kung Fu. There was a host of them, but the Black Belt Magazine was the one that you wanted to be in. The Black Belt Magazine was the official Hall of Fame. How many Hall of Fames are there out there? 1,000, 10,000, 100,000? But you know, I take pride in the fact that I'm the only South Carolinian ever to be inducted into the Black Belt Hall of Fame, the Black Belt Magazine, which is a pretty big honor. So this is exciting for me. I love reminiscing. I love telling stories and going back and sharing my history with other people.
That's awesome. And as the host of this show, I love to hear that. Anybody that's a fan of the show that tunes in knows that even though I'm only 23, I'm a huge sport karate history nerd. So I love going back and hearing the old stories. And it's almost like I can jump back in a time machine and put myself there. And let's start off with that right off the bat, with going back in time to one of those moments. Because the thing that, most people, if they go on the internet, the only tournament that keeps a running record that's at least publicly available of who all has won it is the Diamond Nationals. They have it on their website. You click on the past champions tab, you can read, and the first name on that list is you. So take us all the way back. Do you remember that Diamonds and what was Diamonds like back then?
Oh my goodness. I remember like it was yesterday. Now remember, it was a large tournament, but it wasn't a national tournament. So just, you can picture this. There was a void of a national tournament circuit for about 3 years of national ratings. Karate Illustrated was a magazine that did ratings per sections of the country. It had 12 different regions. There were number ones in 12 different regions. I was a little frustrated. My good friend Mike Geneva and I were competing in the South in that region. And we decided to go to a tournament in Florida. So we went and we were very fortunate. I won, Mike won. On the plane, on the way back, we had an idea. I said, Mike, why don't we create or help create a national circuit all over again? Because there's no one. And Black Belt Magazine came out the year before, and I get this, came out with alphabetical ratings for the first time in 3 years. And Dan Anderson was number 1, and I was number 10. And I remember walking into a store and picking up the magazine, Black Belt Magazine, and I was so excited. I'm just a kid. I'm number 10, and then this is my personality. I went 10. How do they rate me 10? Dan Anderson hasn't beat me yet. I mean, none of these guys have beat me. And then somebody was with me and said, you should just be happy in your top 10. I said, no, don't get me wrong. I'm very honored. I said, but I'm going to find every one of these guys. If I have to pay and travel and pay for the ticket, I'm going to find each one of them. I'm going to fight every one of them. Then if they beat me, they can beat. I don't mind. And that was my mindset that first day. So we were on this plane. I'll get this. So I looked at Mike and we're talking. I said, what if we call some promoters up and encourage them to create a national circuit? And I said, the one coming up is the Diamond Nationals. I knew the Worley brothers and Larry Carnahan and everybody around. So I called up John Worley and I said, John, this is Keith Vitali. I've got a proposal for you. I said, I would love to bring a few members from the South, just a few of us, to come and compete at your tournament. If you can try to help create a national tournament. He'd love the idea. I said, the way you do it is this. Find out these on Karate Illustrated, find these other number ones in different regions. And if you don't mind, reach out to them. Let them know, because I'm number 1 in my region. Let them know that I'm coming. I'm a lightweight. And let them know they can easily beat me. It's not even a problem. And John kind of laughed. I said, no, listen, just tell them I'm going to be there. When they can beat me, I said, it helps their career. And so he goes, I love the whole idea. So I show up. It's the only tournament ever in the history of tournaments I've ever seen. It's so well, the Carnahan of those guys just run like a clock. It was phenomenal. it was the first time I've been to a tournament where everybody was wearing headgear and we didn't wear headgear. And I took Mike Genova with me and Richard Jackson and Bobby Tucker with me. So we go there, and now we're in this tournament, and I walk in and they have this ring, a diamond ring, because you only get one. Now they give them to all the divisions. Back then there was only one winner. And I said, would you mind if I look at it? And then the promoter goes, sure, here. I open up the case, I put it on my finger, and it fit perfectly. And I did this. I wasn't being cocky. I was just making observation. And I went, hey, everybody, it fits like that. And then we go, oh, you're cocky. I said, I'm not saying I'm going to win. I'm just saying it fits. And if it fits, I said, we'll see. So during that tournament, every single time I fault or Mike Genova fault, the person on the microphone would stop the entire tournament. Never seen it happen before. And go, ladies and gentlemen, everybody stop your rings, please. Keith Vitali's fighting in ring 8. And then everybody would get around and watch me fight or watch Mike Genova fight. And we were both on. I was just, I couldn't be on anymore. I just remember I went through a bunch of fighters that day. I remember going through John Carini was number 1. I went through John Longstreet, who was a number 1. I went to Bobby Tucker. I went through a couple of, I just beat a lot of number 1s, not even knowing who they were at the time, most of them. And then so I got into the finals, and it was John Longstreet, Mac Jagger, myself, and Mike Genova. And then Mike Jagger beat Mike Genova, and it was a tough fight with John Longstreet, such a phenomenal fighter. I was, fortunate to come out on top. And then I had to fight Mac Jagger. And Mike Genova are best friends to this day. That tournament was the spark in my career, but it kind of hurt him. He said, because I told him, I said, Mike, if you can beat Mac Jagger, I will split. I'll fight you, but I'll split the money with you, and I'll split the ring with you. And we can share this honor together. We went there together. So he lost, and he tells me, he reminds me all the time, he says, if I could have won that tournament, I would have been up there with you. I would have been there with you as a grand champion winner. So then I fought a guy named Mac Jagger, who was number 1 in his region at the time. And I remember the fight. I remember he's a big, strong guy at heavyweight, and I'm a mover, and I like to move. And people sometimes confuse running and movement. There's a totally difference. Mm-hmm. I don't run, I move. And I like angles. I love the side kick or a round kick or whatever kick you're going to hit me. I take pride and let you miss me by an inch. And I go, oh, that was so close. I'm thinking in my mind, oh, you almost had me. And they're not going to hit me. And I'm moving, I'm going, and led with other techniques. I just stay right outside their range. And then I was very explosive. I had a track scholarship to college. I was a runner, but I was a distance runner. So get this, I know things going in. I train with the best, so I have great kicks, good kicks because of people I train with. But by being a distance runner, I had the strongest legs probably in martial arts. I had the best cardiovascular in martial arts. I don't care who you are. Nobody, I did distance running. I ran 20 miles. I was a miler and distance runner. So I wouldn't even break, get second win sometimes to my 3rd or 4th fight. So, and I learned very early how to put pressure on fighters to break them down. And then my concept was this: I could beat Bruce Lee up and his dad and Jackie Chan all in one day if they're tired. You've ever been so tired in a ring where you can't raise your arms, your legs are heavy? Well, that was always my goal when I fought, to make that person feel just like that. And I would just fake and keep moving, fake and move. And then I know once I get you to that position, I could beat anybody. So that was my mindset anyway. Of course, it didn't always work out that way, but that was the mindset. But because I won that first tournament, I won that first ring, I won that first national, then I won the battle next, the grand championship. Then I called up Roy Kerbin, who had the Fort Worth Nationals or something, and his was a local tournament. And I called him up, and same story. I said, Roy, this is Keith Vitali. I'd like to come to your tournament. He said, I know who you are. I said, listen, if you could do me a favor, if you could invite other number 1s from different regions to come out and let them know that they can beat me, just tell them that. And he goes, Keith, I know what you're doing. I said, no, but tell them. Honestly, just tell them I'm just a lightweight. What am I, 5'11", 150 pounds? Anybody, you should be able to move me around. And so anyway, he did. He said, Keith, I would love for you to win it, because if you did, it would make it a national tournament. So that's how we did it. Then I went to that one and I won that one. And so I started moving at the end of the next year, I was the number one rated fighter in the country. So I went from being in top 10 by Black Belt Magazine, alphabetical, and nobody saw the alphabetical at the bottom. From alphabetical to the next year, I became the number one fighter in the country. And so the thing I'm so excited about, I'm so blessed. Imagine my mentors, the people I trained with, people I read magazines about and articles about, and I went to watch Chuck Norris, Joe Louis, Bill Wallace, Jeff Smith, Joe Corley, Roy Curbin, Jim Boone, Benny Urquidez. These names are famous names. These were just, and I could go on and on and on. You know, these are the people I would either train with or work out with. And so my era was the next one. Then our era had something that no other era had for years. And it made us more versatile fighters than any other era. And it's, we had groin kicks. I'm a kicker. John Longstreet's a kicker. Ray McCallum is a kicker. Mike Jenner is a kicker. Larry Carnahan, Larry Carnahan was a kicker. Larry Kelly was in the top 10. These are all top 10 fighters. We were all kickers. Now, how do we become kickers and survive in an era where all you had to do was kick in the groin? That means if you picked your leg up, you just did a side kick to the groin. So what it meant was they forced us to use combinations. Today, I see tournaments a lot all over the country, and they'll bow and they'll hold, somebody will pick their front leg up and bounce. And I go, that's not fighting. One side kick to the groin, you're down. So, and we have sweeps. Hit down, so you can fight 3 seconds on the ground. So you had to be quick. So in other words, you had to throw a combination like a hand. And when they went to block your hand technique and counter, that's when you threw your kick or vice versa. You know, one of my favorite persons, I love fighting top 10 fighters. Mike Jenner is the historian. And he told me just the other day, which I didn't even know, he said, over the course of my career, I fought 17 top 10 fighters in the Karate Illustrated top 10. They were top 10 in those few years. And I defeated 17 of them. And I took pride in that because I was a kicker. And I knew that most of them, all they wanted to do was kick me in the groin. And immediately, as soon as I picked my foot up, they're coming for my groin. But it doesn't matter because I had a fast back fist. And if I threw a back fist, if you blocked it, fine. If you didn't, I hit you. If you blocked it, well, there's my kicks. So, and I had this as a system. But I remember one of my favorite guys who probably could beat people who beat me was a guy named Steve Fisher out of California. And Steve was a big name, and he trained with Mike Stone and Chuck Norris, and Steve Fisher was just a California kid. And he would beat everybody. He was just wonderful. But I had his number because I would giggle because he was a ridge hander and he was a puncher. So when you threw a technique, he had perfect timing to come off with a ridge hand. And so what that means is when the back fist comes in, he would just come out and then he'd take this hand up and then he would counter with a ridge hand. It worked perfect. So I throw the back fist, he would do this motion. I'm already in my hook kick stance. I got my legs up in the air going, bam, hit them in the head. And he would tell me, he goes, Keith, how are you doing that? And I wouldn't even say anything. I beat him 4 times in a row. He goes, but how are you doing that? I don't even understand. It's just our era. And again, I don't like groin kicks. I'm not a groin kicker. I've never kicked anyone in the groin in a tournament in my life ever. I didn't think that was the way to fight. But it kept me honest. So I couldn't pick my legs up. So, but then it turned out we had a whole slew of fighters that were just what we call versatile, hands, feet, combination spins. And I'm telling you, these guys were phenomenal fighters. So combine that where we had just the greatest fighters of all time first, and then our generation comes, and we now have magazines 24/7, all of them that are in love with Karate Illustrated. I mean, in love with sport karate. They would follow us around, taking photographs, writing articles, doing stories, and most importantly, putting you on covers. Now, it's the covers that creates the stars. It's the articles that creates the stars. And that's what they did, not me only. I mean, we're talking about 20 different people during my time that were on covers. I was on like 12 or 13 in 2 years. One magazine, I had 4 stories in one magazine because I fought 4 different tournaments and one, that they covered. And I won all 4 of them. And then I had people go, are you paying these people? And I go, I'm going to the tournaments. I mean, but the thing about it is now you have you have publicity. You have magazines taking photographs of you, and now people know who you are. And guess what? We go to Europe. They read American magazines. It was their Bibles. America was the center for sport karate. They loved, and so my gym and I went to Italy. We went in a restaurant, and they freaked out when we went in a restaurant. So that's the notoriety that era had that created stars. It's the stars that propelled the sport. And then it went into another few years of that. Then it went into the dark ages. What I mean by dark ages, it means the magazines stopped. And the reason they stopped was the fighters kept on getting better. I don't think they was versatile. Raymond Daniels, probably the best point fighter I've ever seen. I wish I could have competed in this era because I would have loved to train with him to do his techniques. But it just didn't happen. But the thing about it is we were just blessed to come up in an era where we had the magazine covers, we had some of the best fighters of all time, but then some promoters screwed up. They started giving out world championships in every division. Kresge out of Florida and a few others. I have a couple of students that are 37-time world champions. And I go, what world are you talking about? How many fights did you fight? Well, I fought 2 people. Well, you fought 2 people. One bowed out. I went, how can you be a world champion? Well, now multiply that times years and years and years. And what you did was you created thousands and thousands and thousands of world champions that all called up their local newspaper and said, please do a story on me. I went to the tournament and I won a world championship. And they said, we got 18 other people in your division, 25, 30 other people made the same phone call. So all the magazines together all agreed to drop sport karate. It watered down the meaning of sport karate, of world championships. Everybody was a world champion. You go across the street, you'll know there'll be a world champion across the street. Everybody was a world championship. But in our era, there was only one number one, only one number one. And all the magazines, all the ones, we had the ratings. And I loved it. They hated me, they liked me. I had people come up to me and they go, Keith, just huge guys I never met before. And I go, your cover is above my bed. I go, why? And he goes, because every morning I wake up, I think of hurting you, beating you, destroying you. And I went, that is the nicest compliment anybody's ever given me. I said, good luck with that. I said, a little harder to do than you think. I said, but that was the excitement. And there was so much excitement back then. It was the glory time. In those 70s and 80s, everybody had a name. And the reason it was the height of sport karate was because everybody had read about you. Everybody had seen your magazines. Even people not in the martial arts had seen your magazines. I was discovered on 2 martial arts magazines for the movies. And I've got one student, I started the South Carolina, the South Carolina Hall of Fame with Mike Geneva and Sam Chapman. We started it here in South Carolina, and we put in a lot of different people. I love paying back. I've got more awards than I deserve. I got way too much stuff. Really, I feel so bad that I do everything in my power to award other people. So I've got a couple students, Marty Knight, Tony Young. These guys have been fighting for 20 years. They've won 200 tournaments. I said, you've never had an article, you've never had a magazine. I'm your instructor. I didn't even know you've won these. So how would the rest of the country know? How would anybody? In your divisions now today, I know there's a lot of great organizations. I've been to these tournaments are well run. Of course, the pandemic has kind of hurt them a good bit. But back then, we'd have thousands show up, thousands. And like in Texas, you'd have 2 rows just for lightweights. 75 people in each row, just lightweights. And the 2 rows would then have to fight each other. And I, went to Texas the first time, and they were bad to the bone. I walked in, and they just told me, those guys, Al Francis, McCallum, DP Hill, oh my gosh, Ismael Robles, all these guys were just tough. So I go in there, nobody fought back then in Texas because Texas allowed you full contact. You can knock a guy out and get a point back then. The only place in the country that allowed that. And I went, well, I'm number one. I can't be number one if I don't go fight there. screw it. I said, I just got to go. So I took Mike Geneva and Tucker, a couple of people. We went there, and I did well. I did well because they're standstill fighters. They stand there and they'll just beat you to the death, and they'll swing and they go a bit. But I can beat anybody if they stand still. It's the ones that move give me a hard time. You know, I can close my eyes and hit you if you can stand there. You know, so I was very fortunate because my era was just now in an era where all these old great fighters, Joe Louis, they were all standstill fighters. All those guys. My era was really the first era that incorporated movement, started movement. And I got with Joe Louis and I started doing indirect. And I just broke it down. I started working it because before gear was invented, I was fighting heavyweight sometimes because I'm almost 6 foot tall. And I did, so I just had to really figure out a way not to get hit. So I was just very fortunate to come in an era where I had the greatest creators of the sport to train with. Just imagine all those names. I mean, I just training with Ben Urquidez, all these guys are just phenomenal. And then go fight the McCallums and go fight Robert Harris. And oh my gosh, and I'll say some of the names. And to this day, people know the names only because of the magazines. If you tell me top names in the last 10 years, most people won't know those names. You'll know a couple of them because you're in the circuit, you'll know, but the people outside won't know them. People in other divisions, not divisions, but other, like groups, USKA versus PKA or whatever it might be. I said, but watch this. You go with Larry Kelly, Robert Harris, then you go with Nasty Anderson, and you go, I got some of the names in here, Alvin Prouder, you've got Robert Harris, Al Francis, these guys, Bobby Tucker, Flash Newman. I mean, these guys, every one of them have been on covers, every single one of them. And most of them, I had fought 4 times, like Dan Anderson, Steve Fisher, Larry Kelly, all of them, because we eventually would go on the circuit, we'd end up fighting each other, and that was a great thing. Very seldom is somebody going to come out of the tournament and beat one of us. It just didn't happen back then. Very rarely. We knew. I had 2 guys at the airport one time in Florida. I was going to US Open, and they were huge. And and I had won a national before, and I learned a new technique. And the new technique was an indirect movement. Nobody had ever seen before. And the way I learned it was a green belt. Right when I was getting ready to fight, said, "Do you mind if I warm up with you?" And I'm very well known. I warm up with at least 8 people every tournament. I love it because I have great cardiovascular. I love warming up and learning new techniques. Every time I moved on this green belt, he hit me in the head, just touched me. And I was getting ready to fight for a grand championship. And I said, "Excuse me, how are you doing that?" He said, "Let me show you something." He just showed me, and I went, "Oh my gosh, this is so great." So I started to go on and started training. I won my next national and didn't even break a sweat, but I shouldn't have said that because I said it, and then we're not the bar, and one of the magazines wrote about it. Vitali says he won without sweating. So now I'm at this airport, and these 2 big guys, like 6'5", 260. I said, they said, "You're Keith Vitali," and I said, "Yeah." And they go, "Well, you don't look like so much." Well, I look big on covers, but I'm only 5'11", 150, but I look like 6'1" or 2 on the cover apparently. But they go, and I go, "Well, I'm sorry about that." And then they go, "We are here to fight you to make you sweat." And I said, "Well, that's nice." I said, "Are we going to fight now?" He goes, "What do you mean?" He said, "No, we're fighting in a tournament." I said, "Well, I don't know who you guys are. And if you were anybody, I would know you. So the only way you're going to ever fight me, because I'll be in the finals. I'm in every finals." I said, "The only way you'll ever fight me is to fight me right now. Do you guys want to fight right now?" And they went, "You're a cocky asshole." I went, "No offense." I said, "But if you want to fight me, you got to fight me now because you're not going to make it in the tournament. I know who the top fighters are. I just knew who you were." And then they just walked away, and I went, "Where are you going? Don't go away mad."
And what's so funny about that? So a lot to unpack here, right? What's so funny about that is one common trait, because as I've said many times, I'm a nerd when it comes to sport karate. I've studied the history. Great point fighters, all-time great point fighters, by and large, have unending confidence, right? You mentioned Raymond Daniels, perfect example of a guy who never lacked an ounce of confidence, right? And stories like that you tell, it's like great point fighters have that in them, right? And we're going to come back to that because I want to ask a little bit about specifically that Diamonds fight. We'll get into some other specifics of the actual fighting instead of everything surrounding it. But what you mentioned, some of these problems persist in sport karate today. The problem that you bring up of way too many world champions being awarded is still an issue. There's literally hundreds of world champions that get given out on a yearly basis, sometimes within a single league that gives out a whole bunch of world champions in different leagues. And then also there being a bunch of different leagues that name their own world champions, right? And that was one of the reasons that Black Belt Magazine, with me in the building, got together and said, hey, let's bring back these rankings so that there can be a true metric of regardless of what league you're on, who has beat who, and who is going to be number one based on these head-to-head matchups. And that brings me to another point that you made, which is you calling promoters and wanting to fight the number one competitors, right? Because one thing that's common now is because there's so many world championships given out, all of these competitors and sometimes their coaches and oftentimes their parents are out hunting for these world championships. And so sometimes they do this by trying to dodge certain competitors, right? And they'll look and they'll say, oh, well, this person's really good. I know they're be on this league, so I'm going to slide in and go get my world title over in this league and say I'm a world champion, right? And so whereas now, and that's not everybody by any means, but there are a lot of competitors now who sometimes kind of dodge other world champions, whereas I think it should be exactly the way you described, where if you want to be a world champion, you shouldn't just earn the title because some acronym, WSK, whatever, right? Not because some acronym says that you're a world champion, but because you truly became the best in the world at your craft. And you can only figure that out by beating the other people who are considered to be the best in the world, right? And so I absolutely love to hear that perspective from you. And I think that that's something that all of the active sport karate community right now needs to listen to, because what's the one thing that in these discussion boards and Facebook pages that we always talk about? How do we get more recognition? How do we get more sponsorship? How do we get our top athletes known? You described it beautifully. Don't dilute it. Make the top athletes the top athletes.
Right, and I really credit. I'm so happy to hear about Black Belt Magazine, taking the lead in this, and because, for example, Bill Wallace one time, this is about 3, 4, 5 years ago, he was in Russia or China, some wild place, and he came back and he goes, Keith, they're still talking about you and there. I said, well, how do they talk about me? He says because of the magazines. He says they read magazines. They still have the old magazines. There's been no magazine for 30 years. There's been none. There's no. He said, and Bill Wallace told me, he says, you couldn't tell me who the top fighters are other than one or two. There's so many different organizations and leagues and the whole business. He says, and there's no stories about them. He says, but back in our day, we had so many covers, so many articles, so many stories, what I like to do. And the whole, it's just like MMA today. MMA is probably the biggest competition you have right now for sport karate. We didn't have that at the time. But the guy Dan, what's his name? Dan White, from MMA, UFC. He started the TV show and he started creating personalities, and he got a following, and that's what he's done, and that's what we had at the time. It was incredible. We would sign autographs. We would have followings. We would just, it was a crazy time. I would do crazy stuff. One year, I was like 3 years I was number one. And I just wanted to stay there. I just couldn't imagine. And I had a friend of mine, Dwayne, from Texas, and he came down and printed up a T-shirt, and he put like 8 beautiful women on there with me in the uniform. And I'm standing there, and I had my hand around the women. I said, "Good things happen to who's number one." And I had T-shirts made game to all the other 9 top 10 fighters, or just stuff like that. They go, "We hate you. We love you, but we hate you." And the thing is, I had a hate relationship with my biggest rival was Ray McCallum. We're like brothers today, but that's fine. That's how it should be. I had my best friend at the time was Ray Benova, and I was fortunate to beat him the 2 times I fought him at both grand championships. But he was a friend, whereas Ray McCallum, and we would talk trash. We in the magazines would write things, and Jeff Smith would say, or Bill Wallace, or all come to me, go, "I can't believe you said that." I go, I don't care. I want to fight this guy. That's just it. I had one guy, some people came to me and I was fighting these tournaments, but I didn't go to one region. And they said, "Well, you just duck in this region." And I said, "Who says I'm ducking that region?" And there was a guy, I can't remember his name. He was a top 10 fighter before I was. and he's 6'7". And Mike Genova fought him, and Mike Genova said, this guy has the quickest back fist you ever. So I said, all right, let's train. I'm gonna go find this guy, and I'm gonna fight him. So Mike says, I'll teach you how to beat him. So we went there. I said, he says, Keith, he says, you're not gonna believe this guy's speed. He's so fast. He's a black guy. He's got so much speed. Phenomenal, great guy. And he says he'll hit you when you think you're far enough out of the distance, out of range. So we started training. He says, here's what I want you to do. He says he's just a back fister because he's so tall and lanky. He says, I want you to take your backhand and put your backhand not here, as far as you can get it, and put it way, 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 way out here. And we did drills and did drills. Finally, I found the guy someplace. I went and I found him. And I said, and we made it, and I ended up fighting him. And that same night, we were on a plane, and we sat next to each other, flying to another, because I'd fight double tournaments all the time. Saturday fight, I fight Sunday. So I was traveling to another tournament, he was going too. So I'm fighting, I'm fighting the guy, and we bow, and he's way over there, and he throws a back fist, and I couldn't even believe he almost hit me from like the kitchen. Like, I'm not even in a ring, he almost hit me. And I went, my gosh, this guy is fast. Long arms like you wouldn't believe. So I did my thing like Mike Genova helped me with, and I held it up. And so we were fighting, and he kept on hitting my gloves. And I had kicked him in the head a couple of times because tall guys, they're not used to blocking their head. So I get inside, and I hit him a few times. I'm up 3-4 to nothing. And he stops the fight. He goes, time out. He said, Vitali's cheating. And then people said, why? He says, he's putting their hand up there, and I can't hit him. He says, he's got the hand way over here. That's not how you fight.
That's funny. And that's like great point fighters. You got to adapt, right? So that's one thing I love when you talk about. Yeah, go ahead.
I laughed and I hugged him. I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I wouldn't bring it here, but you'd hit me. So the reason I have it here so you can't hit me, and so those are the times. But you were speaking about the difference of karate now. And I think there's resurgence. I think black belts can be part of the resurgence. Your biggest competition is going to be getting notoriety and fighting against MMA fighters that say, oh, poo-poo on this because that's what you have. We didn't have that back then. So we just had magazines that loved us, magazines that followed us around, and we had fighters that were just bad to the bone. Ken Anderson was so good. Oh my gosh, I'd fight these guys, and Terry Cassell. I mean, all these named fighters I would hear about, and they'd be, all of them had punches that if they hit you with them, you die. And you just have to fake. And one of them, a guy named Tommy Williams, he was a world champion full contact fighter. And I fought him and the guy that defeated Benny Urquidez from full contact. I mean, I fought all these guys in Oklahoma at Chuck Norris' tournament. And I remember Tommy Williams, I'm a point fighter and he's a full contact fighter, even though he's rated point fighter too. And I'm beating him pretty easily. And so I win, I'm on like 5-1 or 2 or something. And at the end of it, right when they say time, he spins and my hands are down and hits me with a spinning back fist. And my own student, Richard Jackson, we were the first ones in the country doing the spinning back fist that we learned from Eddie Anderhart. So when he hit me, I had the perfect neck, tall, and he just hit me so hard. And I remember they go time. So they go bow to each other, and we bow, and they go me, I won. And I looked at him and I said, you hit like a girl. I just looked and said, you hit like a girl. And I walked away. A year later, Tommy comes to me at an event. He goes, Keith, can I talk to you? And I said, yeah, why? He says, I hit you my best spinning back fist I ever hit. I've knocked out like a dozen people. And you call me a girl. He said, Tommy, I couldn't see you or hear you. I didn't even know what direction. I was out of my feet. I was like looking over here, hoping you were there when I was bowing, saying that to you. He was so excited. He picked me up and hugged me. And he was hugging me going, oh my gosh, I thought I lost my mojo. Oh my, thank you so much for telling me that.
That's funny. That's awesome. And that's one of the things that I want like young competitors that tune into this to hear, right? Is that number one, a lot of what you would say about others that would get written in the magazines, that just adds to the hype, right? It's MMA fighters talk about it all the time. It's just business, right? Like you don't actually hate or something,
no.
Right? But most of the time, right, you don't actually dislike that person, but you're going to go in the ring and fight them. And so sometimes little things like that help build up some of that drama. And then one thing that you've said every time there's been a story like that, there's also the reciprocated respect, right? Once it's all said and done, you mentioned guys that you're good friends with now, interactions like that after it's all over. Really, that's what sport karate is all about. Because at the end of the day, we're still martial artists, right?
Here's what I did, and I was very fortunate because I had a cardiovascular to do so. when I was a white belt, I said, well, I don't want to pay money, lose my first fight, and then go home. At least I want to ask somebody if they wouldn't mind working out. This exchange techniques, like warming up. You know how people do before a tournament. You warm up with somebody. And I got that rhythm. I got that in a habit. And I would do 8 people every tournament, from white belt to black belt. I go 8 different people, all white, all sizes, didn't matter divisions. I don't care if you're a girl or guy. And I want to warm up. A lot of times I'm learning from your techniques. And I'm learning all the time, but I really enjoyed working out with people. And before long, I fought 1,000 people, even though I haven't fought 1,000 people in the ring yet. So that was part of it, the enjoyment, but the pure enjoyment, the having all these top fighters, all one in your head, and you've got to have confidence. And I remember going, I'm too confident in a way that I'm not upset. I'm shocked when I lose. I'm going to lose, but it's almost like one time I went, how'd I lose? I saw this in my dream, and I don't lose. I didn't lose this fight. I mean, I know I'm going to win every fight in my mind. If I don't think that way, then I'm not going to be first offline. I'm going to be tentative. If you're tentative, then that's when the other person controls the fight and the momentum of the fight. So I like to move, I like to fake, and I like to think that my techniques are going to score. And I can do whatever with the techniques. We had great kickers. Larry Kelly, oh my goodness, he had the best heel kick I've ever seen, quicker than Bill Wallace's. We just had great kickers. The best all-around technician, I think they voted me as that, but really the best all-around technician was Ray McCallum, because he was a black belt in judo too. And one of the fights I fought him for the PK Nationals, I won in three-minute rounds, but he swept me 8 times before I knew how. I could do basic sweeping, but I didn't know his kind of sweeping, judo sweeping. And he took me down, and magazines just tortured me. Vitali wins, but he's beating the crap out of it. Today, Ray he's upset with me. We talk, and I go, Ray, it's over. He goes, yeah, but I still kicked your butt that day. I said, I know you did. I know you did. I said, and you did. But I brought him to Atlanta so he could teach me the sweeps. So he came into Atlanta, and I was very fortunate to work with Joe Corley, because he had the bout of Atlanta, and everybody would come in at that time. I trained with everybody. I trained, if you were there, you came in to train. And so he taught us sweeps. I learned those sweeps. And then I told everyone, top 10, I will sweep every one of you my last year competing. I don't care who you are, you're going down. Because that's how obsessed I was. I took Ray McCallum down, took Nancy Anderson, I took them all down. I just got so good at sweeps because he taught me how to sweep. And then the last one we went to Diamonds again, and it was 5-5. And I truly believe I scored, and he believes he scored overtime 5-5, and he got the point. So he wins the diamond ring. That's fine. We bout each other. And the last time, my last tournament, my very last tournament, I'm going to fight him. It's in Oakland. And I said, I'm going to go out. I want to fight him. And I went to him, and I said, and he's standing by the ring, and we don't even like each other. And we don't even talk to each other. We just crap, man. We want to kill each other. So I went to him, and he's by himself. He goes, what do you want? I said, well, I'm going to fight you today. I said, I'm going to beat you 3-0. There's nothing you can do about it. He said, you're not going to beat me. And then I walked away. He's yelling at me, you're not going to beat me. Nobody's ever beat me 3-0. You're not going to do it. So I knew the first move was he's coming 1,000 miles an hour. So I went down to his move, got my hips down, and he flipped right over me. I was laughing because that's what he does to other people. And then he was just like this. And then I threw 3 techniques and hit him 3 hook kicks in the head. And within 20 seconds, beat him 3-0, something like that. And then he just looked at me and goes, you did beat me 3-0. But it was those kind of rivalries, and in my mind, I had already played it out. I knew what I was going to do and how I was going to do it, But think about this era. It's so different now. I remember fighting, and I fought 4 top 10 fighters, and they're all light heavyweights. They were all just big. I won it on a Saturday, and then Mike Geneva and I said, Mike, I'll pay for your ticket. Let's go. We flew to California, and there was a tournament in California. And then California kid, Steve Fisher, had a tournament. He put us up that night, and then he had us. And here's the kind of things they did back in the old days. So I'm fighting, and I've already fought a bunch of times in the first day. So now I'm fighting the second day. I'm not seated. I fight all day long. Now I get to the finals, and I fought a bunch of times, 8 fights, 9 fights already, 8 fights. So now there's a guy named Larry McCallum that shows up, and there's Nasty Anderson and myself, the last two. Now, Nasty, it's my last year, and Nasty is a brand new black belt. He just got his black belt. He's a big name because he's a famous brown belt in California at that time. So now I'm getting ready to fight him. And as I get ready to fight him, I just finished my last fight. And Nasty, because he's heavyweight, he didn't have that many fights. And I had already been through mine. And so Steve goes, "Are you ready?" And I said, "No, I'm fine. I'm in good shape. I'm ready to fight." He said, "But before you go," he says, "now the stands are crazy. I mean, they're full." He says, "We have a tradition here. You've got to fight last year's grand champion." And I said, I was wondering who that guy is, Larry McCallum, standing there with his gear on. I said, what do you mean I got to fight him? And Steve goes, Anderson goes, "I'm not going to fight him. I'm from California." And then Steve goes, "Well, we don't want him to fight him because he's from this area, so we want you to fight him." And I went, "Okay." So I beat him like 7-0. I didn't play with him. I spanked him. As soon as I fed, Steve goes, "Are you ready enough?" I said, "Can you give me just give me 2 minutes. Just give me 2 minutes." So now I'm fighting Nasty Anderson. And I remember losing, and it was one of the heartbreaks of my life because he turned out to be a great fighter, but he was not a great fighter at that time. He was a kid who played, who dove on the ground, who was just having fun, but he wasn't a great fighter. Years later, I mean, I thought he was a green belt. So I'm fighting him. Mike Stone is the center referee. And I know who Mike Stone is. He doesn't know me from anybody. And we're fighting, and we're moving around. I score, he scores. He throws a reverse punch, scores, and he gets excited. He runs and gets into the stands. And I go, "Where are you going?" I looked at the center judge. I said, "Stop time, stop time." Mike Stone says, "You know who I am? You don't tell me to stop time." I said, "Stop time." And he says he's sitting. And Steve was sitting in the stands, sitting, doing this and smiling. And the referee goes, "Time." And that's how I lost that first fight. And I was like, those are kind of things that just, oh my goodness, but then he turned out to be a much better fighter. But back then he would throw the reverse punch and dive and fall on the ground. And he'd fight like guys like Big John Jackson. And Jackson would just chase him all over the place. I had a student, Vernon Johnson, fought him 3 times and beat him 3 times, at that time. So I had great students, but we just had the magazine printed at the end of it. I fought 17 times in this 2 tournament, and I won grand champion 1 and took second. And I lost out to Nasty in the second one. But how exciting is that? I mean, think of it. Just think how fun that is and exciting.
Right. And it's such a different perspective from what sport karate fans today know because of the fighter that Nasty Anderson would become. I mean, a lot of times when people talk about who are the greatest point fighters of all time, old school guys will say, "Oh, Nasty Anderson." New school guys will say, "Oh, Raymond Daniels." And so that's kind of the back and forth. But, I've got an interesting question here because I noticed this in preparation for the podcast. I Wikipedia'd you, right? And I noticed that it said you started martial arts 3 years prior to the year that you won the diamond ring, right? Which for sport karate competitors nowadays, that's like you're in martial arts for 10 or 15 years before you think about winning the diamond ring, right? And then you bring up Nasty Anderson. I was doing a podcast episode, this is months and months ago, but I was doing some research for it because the whole thing was like crazy sport karate stats. I wanted to find these crazy stats. And I found that Nasty Anderson won like 88 consecutive matches. Okay, that's a lot of consecutive matches. He did it as a brown belt, right? And so it's like, wait a minute. So take us back then. I mean, how common, like the experience level of some of these top fighters, what did it mean to be a brown belt or a green belt back then? Because we know that's different today because people pump out black belts like nobody's business, right? So take us through that aspect of it, because that's something that's very foreign to any modern sport karate fan.
Well, back then, the best, I always thought the fighters to look out for were the brown belts. And so what I always would do during my, before I'm fighting, I'm watching the brown belts fight. And I had a system, I had a trick, and it served me well for years. I was able to get on the side of a ring, on the side of one fighter, and fight that other fighter from a distance, outside the ring. And I'd go, sometimes I'd go, "Oh my God, he just hit me with a back fist." He would be that fast, or he would fool me, so I would know he would have scored on me. And I would always watch, and I would tell the brown belts, and I'd go introduce myself to them. And I go, "I know I'll be fighting you soon, because you're a great fighter." And I did that. I did it all the time. I love watching the brown belts fight. I remember Nasty was a great fighter. We went to internationals, I took one of my black belts, Charles Fears, who was a top 10 fighter later. And Charles was a brown belt, and Charles had 2-0, and with like 5 seconds to go, and end up losing the match and brown belts. And it's the first time at the internationals that I was so excited because I met Dan Anderson for the first time. I met a lot of fighters. I just wanted to see new fighters. And what we did was we didn't even care about the tournament. We wanted to spar each other before we did. All of us, we'd spar, and we'd be sparring hard too, just because it was like kids in a candy store. But back then, the top brown belts, what you do is a lot of the tournaments, some of the divisions, you'd have old timers coming in, and it's true to even today. And they're rusty black belts, and they've been black belts for 20 years. They don't train hard like the brown belts. The brown belts are hungry. Brown belts are training every day. You got to respect the brown belts. A brown belt can put a black belt on a win on any day, I think. So the brown belts are tough fighters. And I never, ever, ever would look at a brown belt and go, oh, he's just a brown belt. I go, no, I'm going to have to fight that guy one time. That's a great fighter. And here's the key. If you win as a white belt and gold belt, green belt, you're going to win as a white belt. It's not, you're a winner. It's the winning. You found out how to win. You'll adjust. You'll learn the techniques. But if you didn't win as an underbelt, all these belts, you'll miraculously all of a sudden start winning your tournaments. Winners win because who they are. It's not about their technique. I'm not the best kicker, or definitely not the biggest, strongest, or whatever. That's why Chuck Norris is my mentor. I love that he was almost the same height and weight. We had to be intelligent. We had to use combinations in order to do it. I wasn't half as fast as Bobby Tucker. Eddie Flash Newman, they're so fast. They could be in circuses. They're so fast. Some of these guys, literally, they really are. So you just had to really train and be a totally different kind of fighter.
So we talked about so many of these legends that you fought in the past, and you mentioned, the guys that had the great kicks and the technicians like Ray McCallum or these guys that were super fast, right? So when you look back on it, and maybe this is 2 or 3 people instead of just one, but who was it that with your particular fighting style, who gave you the toughest matchups? Maybe they weren't the best fighter you ever fought, or maybe they are, but who was the toughest for you, the toughest code for you to crack?
No, it was McCallum. McCallum was he was a good groin kicker too. He had a good side kick, and he had a beautiful hook kick, hook kick, like Bill Wallace to get the knee up really high. So he was a technician. But then his punches were phenomenal. But then he had a judo background too, and he developed and created some new movements I had never seen in martial arts today. I've never seen anybody do what he did. There was a group of us watching him fight in Texas, and we were all standing around, and it was like 4 of the top-rated fighters. We were high-fiving each other because we were his biggest fans. I went, oh my God, I can't believe he did that. And then we got quiet. We went, one of us has got to fight that guy. For example, the guy would pick up and he would skip in the side kick and throw a side kick. Ray McCallum would dive, shoulder roll on the supporting leg, and he would hit the leg like a football player. Just dive across the gym, hit his leg, then he would roll up and do a backflip and land on the guy with his feet in his head or in his body. So he could roll and jump and spin and backflip and land on you. I saw one time where the guy threw a reverse punch, and as the reverse punch went out, he threw his legs and body straight out like this. The reverse punch comes across, and he's horizontal like this and grabbed the arm and flipped him over and rolled on top of him and hit him in the head. He did techniques we had never seen before. And when I would score on him, I was faster than him. I could hit him all day long. There's nothing he could do, and I don't care if he was here. I could just hit him all day long. But you're going to pay for it, because once you hit him, bring it back, he's grabbed you. Once he's got his hands on you, then he's tuck and rolling, and he's doing a flip. And once he flips you for that roll, he's on top of you, hitting 3 times, 4 times until they have to pull him off of you. That's every point. That's every point. So I know I can hit him, but every time he's going to do the judo stuff and get me down. So yeah, but Bobby Tucker, I'm not sure if you know the name, but he was the fastest human being I've ever seen in the South. And he beat me 10 straight times. And he was always seated, and I was always fighting my way up. He was before my time. And I always said, if I can get him to be in the same level to me but he was always fresh. And I had to fight all these fighters. And the first time I fought him where I was seated and he was seated, then I beat him the next 10 times. But all my 10 times were in grand championships or semi-grand championships. I stopped him from winning probably 10 major tournaments. He should have been number 1 of all time. And he was so fast. He was so fast, he came to see me and he said, "Can I help you?" And he came to my apartment when I was living in Columbia, South Carolina. And I said, "What are you doing here?" He goes, "We're friends." And he said, I got to help you. He said, "You're never going to beat me if I don't help you." I said, "Well, if I beat you," he said, "I don't care. There's no competition." Nobody could beat him. He said, "There's no competition." And he was so fast. And I said, "Well, come on in, let's get dressed." We work out in our dens back then. And then he came in and he goes, "Here's your problem. I was fighting full contact. And I had won about 6, 8 fights. I had only lost one. I beat Larry Carnahan in points, but I lost to him in a very close match in Falls Church in Virginia. He's such a great guy, and it was a close match, but we were like twins. I watched the film and I don't know who's who, we're like the same height and weight. But Bobby Tucker came up to me and he goes, "Hold your hands out." And he says, "I want you to move your hands." And I couldn't move my hands. He was just so fast. And then he did it. I couldn't hit his hands. He said, "Keith, you're fine full contact and you're telegraphing all your moves." He said, "You got to pick a lane." And then I said, "All right, I'm going to pick a lane." I stopped my full contact. I had some good wins, some good fighters. I stopped all that and I just focused on points. And I said, "Bobby, I hate to say this, but I'm going to beat you eventually because your work teaching me." He goes, "I don't care." He didn't care. He didn't travel as much as me. He just didn't care. He was just so fast. He never set up a technique in his life. I said, "Well, you just set up." He goes, "I don't set up anything. I just see it open, I shoot it." He's that fast. I said, "Well, you should be in the circus." And his hands, I'm not even exaggerating. He should have been in the circus with his hands. So the way I beat him was I get outside, I make him reach and circle and reach. Then the fakes, and then when he would respond, my kicks and kick him. I remember I kicked him 7 hook kicks in one tournament, in the head. So, but that's how it was back then. But think just how nice that was. Let me tell you one story that changed my life. You know how we all go a certain path, and if that one path, if you chose a different direction, your whole life would have been changed. That's why you got to stay positive and focused and have the right attitude. And I remember I was doing well fighting back in Columbia, South Carolina, and we had a bunch of fighters, Bruce Brucci and Pete Manchi and all these great guys back in the old days. And so I would train with them, and I was strictly Taekwondo, nothing but Taekwondo. I only fight Taekwondo tournaments. And when I got my black belt, I won my first national tournament, Taekwondo tournament, the day I got my black belt. I mean, I was just one of those fighters. I'd never heard of open tournaments. Didn't even know they had them. So my friends came to me and they said, "We think you need to go to an open tournament called the Battle of Atlanta." So I said, "Oh, sure, let's go." So I go to the Battle of Atlanta, and I went, "Oh my gosh, there's got to be 5,000 people in the stands, and there's thousands of people on the floor." It was at the basketball arena for Georgia Tech. It was gigantic. I just couldn't believe the excitement. And all the names are there: Radar Smith, Joe Lewis, Chuck Norris, Bill Wallace, everybody's there. So I go there, and my first fight, I'm fighting a Radar Smith student, checkerboard D, and he beats me within an inch of my life. He is hitting me. I can't stop it because back then I was new. I still haven't modernized my movements yet. I was still stepping behind. I was sliding up. I just wasn't as progressive as I was at the end of my career. And this guy really was. So they said, the judge goes, I heard the timer go 10 seconds. And when he said 10 seconds, he went 4-0. And my first thought was 4. I thought it was 14-0. I thought he was beating me that bad. So he hits me that, and I was like, oh my gosh. Now think about this, and I know we talked about this before in one of our top of points, or it was the only year ever, where they gave 4 points for jump, spin, and back kicks, jump kicks. They gave 2 points for kicks to the body, 4 points to the kicks to the head if it was a jump, and 3 points to the head. They tried it as an experiment. It didn't last long, but that was it. So now I'm down 10 seconds to go. I'm losing 4-0. I'm not even close to hitting this guy. What the heck? I do a jump, spin, and back swing kick. I like that kick anyway. And I kick him right in the head. So now it's 4-4. The judge goes, ready, and ready, 4-4, go. And I hit him in the back fist. I win 5-4. Now, I won 5-4. He looked at me like, did I not just beat this guy up for almost 2 minutes? Just beat me like I was a white belt. So bad that if I had lost that fight, my gentleman made this observation just a few years ago to me. He said, Keith, if you had lost, that's your first fight ever for a big event, open event. you most likely would have gone back to Columbia, South Carolina. You would probably, because I wanted to be an attorney, you would probably, become an attorney, but you would not have gone to any more schools. I mean, any more tournaments. You probably definitely wouldn't have fought any more nationals because I was a new black belt and I didn't think I was that good. And because look what this guy just did to me. But I won that first fight. Then I fought the rest of the day. And then in the finals, Bobby Tucker beats me. I fought 8 fights, Bobby fought 1. It's me. And he was cocky. You were, no big deal. Anyway, a guy comes to me at the end of the tournament and he goes, "You fought pretty good today." I said, "Well, thank you." He says, and he had a professional karate magazine. And he says, "You know who you beat today?" And I went, "No." He says, "You beat 4 of the top 10 fighters in the country today," which I had no clue. And if you had told me, I would have been so tentative, I would have never gone first, because you would have thought, "Oh my gosh, the legend." But I didn't know. And I thought the first guy I beat should have been the world champion because he just tore me up. And then I beat Larry Carnahan, Ken Dallas, Michael. I mean, there was a group of them. I beat them all that day, didn't know who they were. And I just went through them and then lost to Bobby Tucker. So my first national event, I took second, to Bobby Tucker. But the observation was, if I had lost that first fight, not the tournament, that first fight, just that fight, thinking that I wasn't that good, I would have gone to I would have taken a different path in life. So that 4-point kick changed my life. It put me in the direction of martial arts, but led me to movies and books and everything else in life that I've been successful with. So, but Mike always points back to that one. He's the key. That one kick. If you didn't do that kick, you wouldn't have gone any further. I went, "No, you're right. I definitely didn't think I was that good."
That is wild. And that's a perfect segue, right? So a crazy story. Thank you for sharing that. But it brings up this topic of how many points does a kick get, right? And it's a very hot topic right now. Actually, there was an event that just recently happened. So Jesse Ray with Team Next Level does the virtual fight tour. There was a controversial no call on a defensive sidekick late in a fight against 2 of the top lightweights right now, Robbie Lavoie and James Poore. I'd have to go back and watch the footage to tell you if I thought it landed or not. But it was a tough call, right? So it was a no call. A lot of people thought it should have been a call. James winds up winning. Robbie was the one who threw the defensive sidekick. In that league, when they fight virtual fight tour, the kicks to the body are 1 point, right? So that's why, like, this week it's a hot topic because it was like, well, should you call it? Should you not? Over the past several years, there's been the issue of, well, yeah, you can throw a body kick and score, but judges are calling body kicks when it's not an extended defensive side kick. Somebody will pull up their chamber and their foot will touch the other guy and the judges will call that, right? And so that's part of the debate. And then all of it settles back on, right now on NASCA, body kicks are worth 2 points, right? And there's a huge debate on, should it be 2 points? Should it be 1 point? A lot of the top fighters right now, even great defensive side kickers that I've talked to, say it should be 1. What's your take? Why?
Great question. I love the 2-point kick. You've got to be rewarded for using your legs because it takes so much more, discipline and time and effort to train and develop these wonderful kicks. So to be able to stand there like this and just do reverse punches, you can have longer arms or be a little faster in your timing. But to be a kicker and to be able to score with them, here's the problem though. Your defensive side kick doesn't have to be extended. And the strength of a defensive side kick is when it's not. When it's extended out is where you lose your power. When I was a white belt, I had a crazy Korean instructor who was just insane. And they thought we were all crazy. And I was in South Carolina close to forts and we had people challenging all the time. It was back in the 70s and people challenged you. And I was a white belt. Gear will not be invented for another bunch of years. There's no gear. I'm a total student at USC, and these guys come in, merchant marines and fighters from all over the world, and my instructor is Korean. I tell you, fight them. And I have to fight him as a white belt, and I get killed all the time until I learned my side kick, how to stop with a side kick. I was shocked that the majority of the time, I broke somebody's rib with a side kick, and I broke 54 people's ribs as a white belt. I stayed a white belt 1 year, 1 month. Because he won, back then you didn't get promoted. So I was a white belt for a long time, no gear, but I could develop that side kick and I could throw my heel and snap it or extend it in a way that sometimes I go, I didn't even throw it. And the guy would be on the ground going, you broke my ribs. I go, but it wasn't extended. But when you do extend it, now, if you do catch it at the right place, 3/4 is the way out extended. That's the perfect side kick. But most of the time I broke people's ribs was when it wasn't extended. They would run into my heel. And as they're coming, the faster they came in, the harder it punches the ribs with my heel. And sometimes I did nothing more but to pick it up and just get a little bit of a push. And then I would, but my instructor was Korean, so our kicks were, the side kick was the Bible of our whole foundation. And we would stand like this and we would just do hours and hours of side kick drills and hitting bags. I remember the first time I hit a bag, the guy holding the bag, he said, "You've never hit a bag before?" I said, "No." He goes, "That's impossible. That's the most power I've ever felt in my life from a side kick." But Korean fighters back then, that's what we did. We learned how really to use our hips and just explode our kicks. So I like the fact that in tournaments that you give 2 kicks per body kick, but then I like to see maybe 3 for the head, because here's the thing, it takes more expertise to get your legs up. You can do maybe not 3, maybe 2 per head, but maybe 3. This is just me talking for jump spinning kicks. Just because you can jump spin doesn't mean you're going to hit it. And the risk factor of you trying that is so dangerous, because if you do a jump spin and swing kick, a hook kick or whatever with me, you barely get out of the way and then you're going to get scored on. So to try that is scary. So, but to try that and to really work on it and execute it properly, you should be rewarded. But the thing about this, now it's no longer soccer. It's no longer 1-0 at the end of the game. Now you've got to get a calculator, because now punch was 1, 2 kicks to the body's 2, some to the head was maybe 3 or whatever. Now there are more points and you're getting higher scores, and now it's more exciting. But the risk, just because you get points to the head, doesn't mean you can do it. You know, everybody goes, Bill Wallace, he only uses his left leg. All you got to do is block it. Yeah, go ahead, block it. He'll still kick you in the head. You know, and there was never anyone ever that I met I couldn't kick in the head, ever in my life, ever. I never fought or never. I didn't think it was possible, because I couldn't touch my toes, because all running, I had real tight legs, but I had really loose hips, almost double jointed. So I get my knee real high, and I could do the spaghetti. I could come over with a hook and the fake round hook. And if I got close enough to hit you that back fist, I could explode the back fist. You don't run from the back fist. So for all you fighters out there, the key to victory is you throw the back fist and you explode it. Nobody runs from a back fist. You parry it, or you block it, or you counter it, but you don't run. Now that I've thrown my back fist, I've got you standing still. So the hard part is, if I start off on my legs, you're going to move. But if I can throw the technique, the hand first, I'll get you in that defensive mode, counter. But now you're going to block that with that back fist. You're going to counter it with a ridge or whatever you're going to do. So I had a key. I knew how to get my fighters around the country, around the world, where I fought around the world, how to stand still. Even when they were moving, I could throw the back fist first, and I tried to hit them. If I hit them, it didn't matter. But when I threw it, that's when they work on the timing. And I could adjust and do that quick hop. I could get my hips up so fast. So at the end of the back fist, my legs are already up now. Now you're in this position and you're looking up going, oh my gosh. And I also have very long legs, because everybody said that. They go, your legs are longer than I thought. I just have long legs. And I go, really? And I say really, but I heard it 1,000 times. I always expected them to say it. So the key was to throw that back fist combination. I'm not going to be groin kicked from a back fist. So I took the groin kick away. I've got you standing still, so I don't have to chase you any longer. Now you're going to counter my back fist, and now I can pick my leg up. And then I got to the point, I did demonstrations around the world when I would travel after I competed. And I would say, there's nobody here, no matter what school, where you were, I don't care who you were, I can kick you in the head. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't stop it. Nothing. Nobody could. And then I did it where they couldn't stop my back fist. You know, I just worked on these kind of explosive drills. And I went, now, if I know that, if I can hit you with my back fist, my kicks, and I said, guess what? Try to hit me with yours. And they couldn't, because I had that movement. I go, you can't hit me with yours, but I know I can hit you with mine. Now, you see the confidence that I have? And then the confidence comes in from not from one side, because you've got certain techniques you like from here, certain techniques from here. You've got to force yourself to be as adept, as efficient on both sides. So when that challenger, that opponent changes, it doesn't throw you off. And I've seen people change, keep changing. And I always, in my mind, I go, good, I'm glad he changed that way. I don't care. I can hit for this side or my right leg from this side. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So in my mind, when I went into the ring, I would bow and I'd go, this person, now not the top 10 fighters, don't get me wrong, but I go all over the world fighting. I'd go, this person has no idea what's getting ready to hit him. But I'm psyching myself up. So as I'm in the ring, I'm bowing in and I'm looking, I'm going to hit this guy so fast that I want to see the shock on his face. And that's what I look for. I like that shock. I like that. I'm in the, this guy doesn't look that tough. All of a sudden, I'm going to hit you in the head with some just bam. And now I'm looking at you and you're going, oh crap, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought. But there's strategy there. Bobby Tucker had none. I don't think Ray McCallum had any. He just bowled you over. Nancy Anderson, his first fighter, all he did was dive on the ground. He took more criticism. People, oh my gosh, he was probably the most hated fighter for the first year or two. People just come up to him and go, we hate the way you fight. And they forced him. I think they forced him to learn how to kick and do different things because he's 6'4" and he was throwing a reverse punch and fall. We'd go, you hit me all the way down to the ground. You didn't stand there and bring it back. I mean, he could hit you from here to the door. He's so tall. And that's the only way he could ever score me. That's the only thing that he ever did. Throw in the reverse punch, hit on the ground, and fall on the ground to get away from it. Yeah.
And that's where we start to talk about a lot of the innovations from today, right? And there's good things and bad things, right? That's what I want to get into next. So like the diving in for a punch and going to the ground, back then, people could score with that if the punch landed. Nowadays, most leagues, if you land, but then you fall to the ground, even if the judges initially lifted their hand up, they go like this and say, no, you fell down, you can't score that way, right? And one thing I love is how much of this is still carried over into today, right? And even across point fighting into forms and weapons, which we're going to talk about that a little bit, but like that intimidation factor that you mentioned of hitting somebody with something and them having that look of like, wait, what just hit me, right? In forms and weapons, we do the same thing. I preach this all the time, especially to my students. It's like forms and weapons competitors often undervalue the warm-up. The warm-up is your opportunity to go out there in these creative and extreme divisions, show all of the things that you could do that day so that everybody else that came to compete can see, wait, if he does that, how on earth am I going to, you see what
That's so good.
That is a part of the game. So people, I feel like often today, people don't respect how important the mental side of things is. And that brings me to, we've talked about so many things that have been conserved over the years, and we still see that today. And then a lot of these things that have gone away, right? Like you talked about the judo techniques of Ray McCallum, right? You couldn't do that in a point fight nowadays. You couldn't grab somebody's, striking limb and pull them and bring them down. You couldn't do some of the sweeps, right? Most leagues are only boot to boot sweeps, things like that. So when you mentioned that you look at tournaments today, let's just narrow it down to one thing. What is one thing that you like about, we'll keep it with just point fighting. One thing you like about point fighting today and one thing that you don't like about point fighting today.
Well, I love the fact that it's explosive. I love the fact they're not standing still and they're off the line. They're quicker than I've ever seen. I mean, they really are. But it reminds me more of a fencing match with swords. They get like this and ready and go. They just attack one fencing move. They throw it out and bring it back. I don't think front hand should ever score except for the head, and the backhand should be a good strong shot. Back then, the negative thing would be that you can come close, approximate to the head and get a point. Where we came from, the head had a rock. I remember being in Texas, I hit somebody and they said, no point. I can't hit any harder. I literally hit the guy as hard as I could hit. And they went, no point, no power. I went, I can't hit him any harder. Oh my gosh, that was a full contact fighter, but I love how explosive they are. I think Raymond Daniels, his combinations and jumps and spins are phenomenal. I like seeing a lot of that. I just miss, I think if you had the groin kicks, which I don't like, would keep people honest, keep them where they had to keep their feet on the ground and then do more combinations. What makes karate pretty is, remember, Daniels, his techniques, all of the beautiful stuff he does. The rest of the fighters, a lot of the fighters I see are one-dimensional. They're very fast with one technique, maybe fast with the second technique, but they don't have the combination where you go boom, 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 boom. There's one of my fights on YouTube. I'm fighting a guy, I'm in a red uniform, and I'm throwing 5, 6, 7 techniques at a time until I score. I'm not just throwing a back fist. I'm not throwing a side. I'm going bam, 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 until the last one hits. You keep coming with the combinations. And the first thing he did was try to kick me in the groin. First thing. So I let him try to groin kick. And then I'm hitting him with all kind of combinations. I let his groin kick get out of the way and go. But one thing that you did, I can't even believe you mentioned this. One of the things we did, Mike and I, we'd do and get to the tournament. We get all the fighters out and we would get in a circle sometimes to exchange kicks. Or I would work out with people. But what I always did was I'd have 2 uniforms, one for the day and one for the night fight. Back then we had night fights, And people said I was cocky. I said, no, I need it because I don't want to wear the wet one in the finals. They go, well, how are you not going to be in the finals? I didn't even understand the question. I went, but why would you even ask me that? In my mind, I'd walk into the gym with the uniforms. So, one for the day, one for the fight. Then when I'm warming up, I'm doing kicks and I'm doing spectacular kicks. Kicks that I'm not going to do in the ring. I'm not going to do those kicks. But I'm doing things I could jump and spin. Oh my gosh, I had those beautiful kicks, and I would do these moves, and I would see a group of my competitors just sitting like this, just sitting there. And I know, and then when I get in the ring, my mindset is win, lose, or draw. There's no way I'm going to lose this fight. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Bruce Lee. I don't care if it's Bill Wallace, Joe Louis. I told Joe Louis the same thing. I said, Joe, during your day, best ever. But during my time, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna hit you all day long. Because I would just hit people. It's hard to beat speed. Speed kills. And if you have movement and speed, it's just really, it's difficult. Right. So the hard line is not to be cocky in a way where you're abrasive, but be cocky in a way that you believe in yourself and you don't come off wrong. And I'm very proud that I accomplished that because thousands of people on Facebook talk about my attitude, which I love. And one of the things I love to do with young fighters, if I fought during the day, was at the end of every fight, I'd shake their hands and I'd go, man, you fought a good fight. And I just tell them that. And then they became fans. And they go, yeah, keep beating me, but look who did it. Those kind of things. So attitude's everything. I learned a lot from Norris, his attitude. I learned a lot how not to have Joe Louis's attitude from Joe Louis. He was just, back in the days, he was just abrasive, but he was good looking and strong and he could be abrasive, and that wasn't me. Part of my enjoyment, I remember Black Belt Magazine interviewed me and they said, what do you miss most about competing? I said, no, don't get me wrong. I miss the excitement. I miss the crowds. I miss the fighting, but I miss the people more. I miss the friendships more because we'd all go out the nights before, most of us. In Raymond, we wouldn't. Ray McCallum would go, he'd get his motorcycle and go into bars in Texas, go to Mexico, into bars and fight. That's how his training was. He was just wild man. And his hair was down and he would scream and he was land both feet in your head and knock you out. I mean, just crazy. It was a tough way to make a living. But I fought 3 years down there. I fought a lot of team fights and won down there. And now my biggest fans are Texans. I got my honorary black belt from Texas. I got my 10th degree from Alan Steen, Pat Burleson, Skipper Mullins, Bill Wallace, all the Texans, all there. Roy Kerman, all my Ray McCallum, all of them were there. And which is really nice to have the Texas people, so people didn't fight down here, that you guys did. You guys from the South actually came down here and fought. And I take pride in that. And now Rudy Spanley, we're all great friends right now.
That's awesome. And again, that's one of the things that's so special about what we do, about sport karate, is those relationships that are built, those lifelong friendships that you find. I met my fiance in sport karate, right? Like it's one of the things that is so special about this. And when it's oftentimes I describe sport karate world champions today, and some people might not like this description, but we're big fish in a small pond. Right? Like you can be a world champion, you can be the best in the world, but right now the sport karate community is rather limited, right?
Yes.
And so it's very tight knit, and those friendships are essential. And ultimately, a lot of what we've talked about in the show are the things that need to be done to help bring it back to the size that it used to be, where you can walk into a restaurant in Italy and everybody knows who you are.
Yeah, and I go all over. I mean, it's really incredible. It's all of us. It was so exciting. It's hard to believe how glorious that era was. I just loved it. I'd go to the store and couldn't wait to pick up one of the magazines because I know it's going to be in most of them. Just think about that. And those magazines created stars. Those covers create stars. That's where all these people, when they do movies, they came from the covers. So I remember this. I think that the forms have really, really progressed, and they're doing things that I can't even believe. It's like Star Wars are so good, but still the foundation blocks were phenomenal during my era. George Chung, John Chung, Cynthia Rothrock, Karen Turner, Peter Morales, Sonny Ono. I'd watch them, and I'm not a forms person. I would go, how did you do that? John Chung was perfect. Perfect. I've never seen anybody perfect. Every move is perfect. George Chung, nothing was perfect, but everything was exciting and wild and innovative with music and just blows your mind. Ernie Reyes was there, and Ernie Reyes Jr. Ernie Reyes be doing it. I go, Ernie Reyes, George Chung, John Chung. Think about that. Sonny Ono in the wildest forms you've ever seen. And I remember even the Minnesota guys at that time, they had their competition team, Carnahan and Court, all those guys were really good. So, I'm just so thankful that I came in an era that I followed the best era. Just the creators, those guys, Alan Steen and Bill Wallace, Jeff Smith, and those guys. Just imagine that foundation. And I got a chance to train with them and learn from them. And in my era, oh my gosh, our names, not just my name, but a lot of the names still are known in this community, in the genre, and here and outside because of magazines. And then we were just fortunate. And get this, it was the only time ever in the history of films, there's about a 10-year period where they had pure, maybe longer, 20 years, pure martial arts films. And they were the martial arts films. The reason they stopped with karate films, martial arts films, is because everybody does karate. So you don't, go watch Tom Cruise. He's doing karate in Samurai, whatever, Last Samurai. His karate is better than mine. So no longer do you make pure martial arts because it died out. And you still have Jackie Chan that I did a movie with, and you got, people like that, but they're rare. But most of the time you have regular cinema, regular films with martial arts inside them. So it really builds the martial arts up, which is phenomenal. But my era didn't have that. My era had, the Don Wilson era. And, all those guys, there's like 10, 12 of us that did all these movies together. No green screens. We had to do our own stunts, but they were pure martial arts movies. And I'm telling you, they just took over. After Bruce Lee made his impact, you're young and you wouldn't have any idea. He was as big as the Beatles when he came out. He was so big that he impacted everybody all over the world. Everybody in the entire world knew who Bruce Lee was. I just remember I was so excited seeing his movies. I just couldn't believe how good he could be. But we had those pure martial arts movies. We had the magazines pushing us and promoting us and creating stars. And we had these wonderful stars. And then we had these wonderful fighters. And I don't want to fight in any other era. That era was just dynamic. And we traveled all over the place, all over the world. And I never ever said, pay me, ever. And that's where at the end, when I heard years later, they had unions, they demand money and show money. I didn't care. I said, you offer money, I'm going to win it or come close to winning. I'm either going to be in the finals or semifinals. In my mind, and I probably took 3/3 in 1,000 fights. The rest were seconds at first, I'm not going to lose in my mind. And so that's how I just was back then. And I had, just so many wonderful friends that even to this day, we get together and we spend time together. Let's think about that. That's 40 years later. And I still remember my fights. I still remember what happened when I beat Steve Fisher in the one for USK, the one with the big trophy, the AK Nationals, that first one. I remember looking at it going, oh my gosh, I want this. No. And I remember John Jackson's like 6'5", about 260. And he just beat up Nasty Anderson like a white belt. And Mike, like I said, Vernon Johnson was top 10. He beat Nasty 3 times in a row at that time. So Nasty didn't really get better at the end. So John Jackson destroyed Nasty. Steve Fisher beat somebody, and then it is me. And I beat my guy. So now I got to fight. I've got to fight the winner between these two. And I'm looking, going, please beat John Jackson. I had to fight him 3 rounds. And then he beat John Jackson. And then I fought Steve Fisher for that one. And then I won the first one for there as well. And one thing I really admired about the Diamond National guys, I grew up with the Worley brothers and Carnahan and that whole group. I just had the most professional spirit. They were just the most gracious host. And I remember after I won that first one, I won money and the ring. 25 years later, they had that 25-year anniversary. They brought me back out, my wife and I, and they brought us out on the stage and put me in their Hall of Fame. And 25 years later, I had my life story up on their screen, and that was such a class act. They're just class act, so I really appreciated them. And if you say what tournament made me or what, it was the Diamond Nationals. That created me, my name. And then from there, it was the domino effect for the other tournaments.
That's so cool. And it's one thing, I tell people this all the time, but it's so hard to put into words. When you compete at the Diamonds, it feels different. So Diamonds, I was very blessed. My first ever national tournament that I made stage at was Diamonds in traditional forms. Now people know me as a bow guy. When I was a kid, people thought if this kid's ever going to be good, he'll be a traditional forms guy. So I made it on stage at Diamonds. That was my first time ever on stage. And even from that moment, I was like, it was in the juniors. I was like 10 years old, 11 years, something like that. But even then, like I felt it. And as I grew up, I didn't win that first one, but as I grew up and started winning some rings throughout my teenage years and then being in the adults, it's like every time you step on that stage, you count your blessings because you realize how much history is behind that event. It's bigger than yourself. It's bigger than that year. There's more to it.
Well, you couldn't have said it better. And it was a class and so well run. So when your ring started, even back then you got to beat your ring at this time, this place, this number. And I love that. And then some tournaments didn't run as smoothly. The Battle of Atlanta was a great tournament. The PK Nationals in California. We had some really nice ones in Texas. The US Open. We had some really, really nice ones down there. And they were huge. US Open would be just gigantic.
Oh yeah, for sure. So now as we approach, because I know we're running on a long show here, but that's okay. Hopefully you guys are still tuning in, having a good time. But I want to move to another big thing that you've referenced here, which is your career in the film industry, right? Because that's also something that now you mentioned we don't really have martial arts movies anymore, but they've been replaced by superhero movies. And a lot of top sport karate competitors, they move to LA or they move to Atlanta and they get into the stunt industry. Matt Emig, Caitlin Deschelle, a lot of forms of weapons people nowadays are doing it. But you get some fighters as well. Justin Ortiz, one of the top lightweights of the previous decade. He's now in the stunt industry living in Atlanta. So tell us a little bit about your time in the film industry, how much of it was acting versus stunts versus both. And then maybe if you got like one cool story that you want to share.
Well, I seem like I have a blessed life. The fact that I ran track in college and that I was blessed as a runner, that was perfect for the martial arts. And that segued into martial arts. So now I'm in a sport where I have my strong legs and good cardiovascular. What better sport is that? So now I'm on all these magazine covers, and then Priscilla McDonald is one of the producers for Canon Films. And Canon Films at that time, in the 80s and 90s, they made hundreds of films. They made all these films. And they saw me on the cover and they invited me to go down. And so I went and did my first film called Revenge of the Ninja. It was the biggest ninja film in the history of ninja films. My first one. Back then, martial arts movies didn't get theatrical releases, but this one did. MGM picked it up, put it in every theater in the United States, put full page ads, print advertising in every newspaper in the United States. And I was blown away. And I had two premieres, had a premiere in Atlanta and a premiere in Los Angeles. And when the movie came out, it was blockbuster success. One week, I've got a magazine article from one of the dailies that the top 10 movies, we were number 3, but the top 10 movies are all iconic movies. If you saw them now, Star Wars is one of them, Risky Business, movies like that. We were number 3 that week. That's the impact that movie had. After that movie, Canon did so well, they started producing and churning out ninja movies. They got so many. Now there's probably been 1,000 ninja movies made, but we had the first one. And, I didn't know, I wasn't an actor, I was a fighter. And I remember at the end of it, Chuck Norris called me up and he's so gracious, so nice. And he was telling me that I did a good job. I know I did. It's my first movie. I just could remember my lines. Later, I took acting classes and I did better and more movies than I did. But I just remember being, oh my gosh, this is just a different world, But to be in my first film and have it as a blockbuster success, and yet to be distributed in every theater in the United States is just phenomenal. So I couldn't be happier. And then with Jackie Chan, it was my next movie. They said, "Would you like to go do a movie with Ben Urquidez and Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung?" And 2 days later, I'm on a plane. I'm in Barcelona, Spain, filming, and Pat Johnson was the fight court here in Los Angeles, and I knew him, so he recommended me to have the part. I got a chance to go with Benny, and Benny and I would fight. Also, we'd go work out. We had downtime, and we go in the gym. And I was number 5 rated in the world at the time, middleweight. He was number 1 rated in the world, middleweight. I was 5 or 6-0, and he was like 60-0. And I'm telling you, I'm so blessed that I never had to fight him full contact. It was like I hit him one time. I would just fight him. And I'd hit him with a kitchen sink. I could hit him all day long. I would just hit him and didn't even phase him. And then he would just smile and go, "You ready?" And I go, "Oh, I know it's coming." He was a tough fighter. But with Jackie, I love working with him and Sammo Hung and all of those guys. I had a lot of power with my sidekicks. They wanted to see it. I ended up hurting Jackie, and I hurt Sammo. I hurt Yon. I hurt them all. So they're trying to figure out a way to get back at me. And so at the end of the film, they had this fight scene in the castle, and I kept wondering, because I'm the bad guy, how are they gonna kill me? And he said, "We have something special for you." So we had this tray with vases on it. It's like you pour champagne, but it was ceramic, and it was a nice ceramic vase with champagne in it. And so Sammo Hung comes out with Jackie Chan, and he goes, "Here's 6 of them. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a fight scene, and at the end, Yong Bao's going to hit you over the head and knock you out with it." And I went like this. I kind of tapped it. It was hard as a brick. I went, "There's no SAG, no union in Barcelona." I said, "No offense, I don't mind." I said, "But I think you can kill me with that." "Oh, no problem. It won't hurt you." I went, "You can take a gallon of milk and hit me in the head and knock me out. Imagine ceramic, hard ceramic." I said, "Well, let's just do it." He goes, "We're going to do 6 scenes unless you do it right the first time." So the first scene is one of my favorite scenes. And we're in this castle in Barcelona, and he's chasing me around, and we're fighting. And at the end, he throws wine in my face, and I do this, and then he takes that vase, and he hits me over the head. It hurt like you could believe. And as I was going out in the film, I'm totally knocked out in the film, and you'll see a small smile, because I'm thinking, I'm so stupid to let him knock me out. And then I just lay on the ground, and I'm knocked out totally. And they all were there. The whole crew was there. They all clapped. That was their payback, because I was hitting them during the film a little too hard.
That's an amazing story. We might have to clip that one and just post it separately so people hear that. So, I mentioned earlier that in preparation for this, right, I was doing my research. I got on the Wikipedia, and, I was reading about the karate stuff and the movie stuff. And then there was one thing that I had to reread it. I was like, what? So I assume this has to have maybe something to do with back when you were doing movies, and there was a connection there. I read that you were also the godfather to Daniel Radcliffe.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Play Harry Potter. So can we get some context there?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I was hacked by a Chinese guy on Wikipedia 3 years ago, and he changed my passwords. I cannot get in to change it. I can't change it. And I keep going, and you can trace it back to when it happened, the date and the place. It's in China. And why would somebody in China make that story up? And then I go, at least it could have made a lot worse stories. It could have been 1,000 things he said. And I don't know how to change it. But I remember that I'm friends with the governor of South Carolina, and I was at a big event in South Carolina, my friends, and they gave me an award. And he introduced me that way. And I said, I have to apologize. It's not true. My account was hacked. It was totally hacked. And I said, it was hacked at the same time. My AOL account was hacked. My Facebook was hacked. And the one time I had 5,000 friends on Facebook, and this guy from China was selling shoes off my site. And somebody called me and says, "Are you that bad off? You got to start selling shoes?" I went, "It's not me, but I can't get rid of it." And I finally got Facebook to remove it. But when you get hacked, you're just, oh my gosh. And there's nothing I could do to get rid of that. And I'm almost scared, because if I do remove it, find out a way, will he put something else on it, or will she put something else on it worse? I don't even know. But why would you do that? Just imagine sitting around in your room in China going, come, and you come up with that.
I'm going to make this guy Daniel Radcliffe's godfather. That's hysterical. So, hey, the message here is that if you want to learn more about Keith Vitali, just rewind this episode, watch it again. Don't go to the Wikipedia page. It's full of lies. Just go watch the podcast. So, sir, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time. I got one more question because I feel like this could be a good one. Anything that you want to share with the sport karate community? Any last words, any kind of message that you want to leave our audience with?
Well, the main thing was I would like to encourage promoters to get rid of the world championships that we discussed. I'm so happy that black belts leading the way and creating heroes again in the martial arts, because we need martial arts heroes. We need martial arts students to be able to pick up magazines like the Black Belt magazine and be able to read and say, oh, look at this guy. I want to be just like him. It's the inspiration. That's the motivation that keeps those students in all the schools competing, not competing, but still taking martial arts. Some will compete, but some will look up that one person and go, I want to be just like him. We need those stars. So I'm so thankful for that. And then the whole idea about the martial arts is discipline and attitude, and just maintaining, just be fired up and, love what you do, but it's your attitude and always paying back and giving back and helping, just smallest little thing, taking time to answer questions or taking time to show somebody a technique, just doing those little things, it comes back 1,000-fold in residual effects. 40 years later, I get the best, wonderful notes from Facebook, from all the things I've done in my past. And it's not about my kicks. It's not about my wins. They don't care about any of that. It's that I took time to talk to them, or I took time to show them something, or I took time to be gracious. I go, oh my gosh, those simple acts of kindness it's what the martial arts is all about.
That is an excellent message. Again, thank you so much for sharing all of the stories, all of the wisdom. This has been an incredible episode. I say this every episode, but if you guys are tuning in right now at the end of the stream, rewind, go back, watch this whole thing. If you enjoy it, make sure drop those comments below. If you've got questions, put them down in the comments. Be sure to tag me, tag Black Belt Magazine. We'll have a look at it. Hit that like button. And then most importantly, if you enjoy this, share it. Part of the reason that I'm doing this whole podcast is to spread the gospel of sport karate. What's the best way to do that? Hit that share button so that all your friends and family on Facebook see it. That's how we get this sport out there, and that's how we get it back to the levels that it was at in the golden age of this sport when Keith Vitali was on top, and then you could get noticed in restaurants in Italy and have your face on the cover of magazines. That's what we want to get back to, and we do that by sharing stuff like this. And it's not just my podcast. You see somebody post their form, share that. You see somebody post a poll about sport karate, share that too. That's what it takes to keep this thing growing. And once again, Mr. Vitali, thank you so much. This has been incredible. That'll do it for this episode. It's been episode 84. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you, Black Belt Magazine, for sponsoring the show. I'm Jackson Rudolph, and I'll see you next time.
Take care. All right, bye-bye.